Most people looked at Noah Lyles and saw confidence. Some saw arrogance. Others saw a gifted sprinter with blazing speed and a personality made for the spotlight. But Michael Johnson saw something completely different. Long before Noah Lyles became an Olympic champion, long before he stood alone at the top of the sprinting world, Johnson kept returning to one idea. It wasn't Noah's speed, it wasn't his powerful finish, and it certainly wasn't his confidence. It was the way he embraced pressure. To most athletes, pressure is something to survive. To Noah Lyles, it seemed to be something he actively searched for. While critics questioned his bold predictions, his celebrations, and his willingness to challenge established stars, Michael Johnson argued that people were focusing on the wrong story. The real advantage wasn't physical, it was psychological. The greatest sprinters don't simply run faster than everyone else. They make everyone else race differently. That is exactly what Johnson believed Noah was beginning to do. Years later, after world titles, Olympic success, and unforgettable championship performances, many fans started describing Noah Lyles as the new face of sprinting. But by then, Michael Johnson wasn't surprised because what he noticed wasn't a future world champion. He noticed a competitor capable of changing how the biggest races were won. So the real story isn't how Noah Lyles became one of the fastest men on earth. It's why one of the greatest sprinters in history believed his greatest weapon had nothing to do with speed. And to understand that, we have to go back to the beginning, before Noah Lyles became a global superstar, when very few people saw what Michael Johnson already did. By the time Noah Lyles was winning world titles, many people assumed his success had been inevitable. Looking back, it almost feels that way. But that's the illusion greatness often creates. Long before sold-out stadiums chanted his name, Noah was simply another talented teenager trying to find his place in one of the most competitive events in athletics. The men's 100 and 200 meters had always been unforgiving. Raw speed could earn attention. But championships demanded something more. As Noah began climbing through the professional ranks, his talent was obvious. His stride looked effortless. His top-end speed was exceptional. Yet there were still questions. Could he handle the pressure of global championships? Could he deliver when Olympic medals, not fast times, were on the line? Those doubts followed him for years. While many analysts focused on his technique or compared him to the legends before him, Michael Johnson often emphasized something less visible. Championship sprinting isn't always won by the fastest athlete. It's won by the athlete who performs best when the pressure is greatest. That distinction matters. History is full of sprinters who dominated regular season meets but struggled when the lights were brightest. Noah Lyles seemed determined to prove he belonged in a different category. He embraced the spotlight instead of avoiding it. His confidence attracted criticism. Some called it showmanship. Others dismissed it as overconfidence. But Noah never appeared interested in becoming everyone's favorite. He wanted to become the athlete everyone had to beat. That mindset slowly began changing how people viewed him. Every interview, every celebration, every bold prediction, they weren't distractions, they were part of the competitor he was becoming. Because behind the headlines and the personality was an athlete preparing for something much bigger than fast times. He wasn't chasing popularity, he was chasing history. And before the world would see that transformation, Noah Lyles still had one final obstacle to overcome. He had to prove he could win when everything was on the line. Coming up, one championship would change the way the sprinting world looked at Noah Lyles forever. By 2019, the conversation around Noah Lyles had already changed. No one questioned his speed anymore. The question was whether he could carry that speed onto the biggest stage. History has seen countless sprinters dominate the regular season, only to disappear when the pressure reached its peak. Championship racing was different. It wasn't about running the fastest time. It was about making the right decisions in the few seconds that mattered most. That was one of the ideas Michael Johnson returned to again and again throughout his career as an analyst. Great champions don't simply run fast. They understand how to win. When Noah stepped onto the track at the World Championships in Doha, millions expected a spectacular performance. What they didn't expect was the calm. There was no panic, no hesitation, just complete belief. When the gun fired in the 200 meters, Noah didn't chase the race. He controlled it. His acceleration looked patient. His transition was smooth. Then, over the final meters, the gap began to grow. He crossed the line in 19.83 seconds. World champion. To many fans, it looked like another display of extraordinary talent. But to those who had spent decades studying sprinting, the race revealed something much deeper. Noah wasn't trying to imitate Usain Bolt. He wasn't trying to become the next Michael Johnson. He was building his own identity. That mattered, because the greatest athletes rarely become legends by copying the generation before them. They redefine what greatness looks like. Michael Johnson has often spoken about the importance of confidence in championship racing, not empty confidence, but the kind built on preparation, discipline, and trust in your own process. Watching Noah compete, many observers began to see those qualities more clearly. His celebrations attracted headlines, his personality divided opinion, but once the race started, none of that mattered. Everything became execution. Everything became belief. And perhaps that was the quality so many people overlooked. They thought Noah's greatest strength was his speed. But championship after championship, he kept proving that his greatest advantage was his ability to perform when the entire world expected him to fail. The sprinter people once called too confident was quietly becoming one of the most reliable championship performers of his generation. And the biggest test of that belief was still waiting, because the Olympic Games would ask a question that every great sprinter must answer. Can you do it when history is watching? For decades, sprinting had followed an unwritten rule: stay quiet, stay focused, let your performances do the talking. The greatest sprinters in history carried themselves with confidence, but many chose to reveal it only after crossing the finish line. Noah Lyles took a different path. Long before the starting gun, he was already talking about winning. He spoke about breaking records, about becoming the face of track and field, about bringing new energy to a sport that desperately needed more personalities. To some people, it sounded like confidence. To others, it sounded like arrogance. Social media quickly filled with criticism. Many believed Noah was creating unnecessary pressure for himself. If he failed, they argued, there would be nowhere to hide. But what many people saw as a weakness may have been exactly what made him different. Throughout his career as both a champion and an analyst, Michael Johnson has repeatedly emphasized that elite sprinting is as much a mental challenge as it is a physical one. At the highest level, every finalist is incredibly fast. The difference is often measured in composure, in decision-making, in belief. Watching Noah Lyles, Johnson frequently highlighted qualities that statistics could never fully explain. Noah wasn't simply comfortable under pressure. He seemed to grow stronger because of it. The bigger the stage, the louder the crowd, the greater the expectations, the more complete his performances appeared to become. That mindset separated champions from contenders, because most athletes try to ignore pressure. Noah embraced it, he invited it, he challenged it, and then he raced anyway. It wasn't an act. It wasn't entertainment. It was part of his competitive identity. Behind every celebration was years of disciplined training, Behind every bold prediction was an athlete willing to accept the consequences if he failed. That combination is rare. Many runners possess world-class speed. Very few possess the courage to carry the expectations of an entire sport before the race has even begun. As the years passed, something remarkable started to happen. The conversations around Noah slowly changed. People stopped asking whether he talked too much. Instead, they began asking whether anyone could actually beat him when the stakes were highest. And just when it seemed Noah Lyles had finally earned universal respect, his greatest challenge arrived from a place no stopwatch could measure. Because the next battle wouldn't be against another sprinter. It would be against his own body. By the time Noah Lyles reached the top of world sprinting, something unexpected happened. Winning races was no longer enough. Every championship brought a new expectation. Win again, run faster, break another record, prove the critics wrong, again and again. For many athletes, success makes competition easier. For others, success becomes the heaviest burden of all. Every time Noah walked onto the track, he wasn't simply racing the men beside him. He was racing against the version of himself the world expected to see. That kind of pressure has broken extraordinary athletes before. History remembers champions who dominated for a season, only to disappear when expectations became impossible to carry. What made Noah different was that he never pretended the pressure didn't exist. He spoke openly about the emotional side of elite sport, about confidence, about doubt, about the responsibility that comes with representing a sport searching for its next global star. Those conversations surprised many people. For decades, elite sprinters were expected to project only strength. Vulnerability was rarely part of the public image. But Noah chose a different path. He showed that confidence and honesty could exist together. That openness didn't make him weaker. If anything, it made his performances easier to understand. Because confidence wasn't something Noah was born with. It was something he built through preparation, setbacks, and the willingness to keep showing up when the expectations kept growing. Michael Johnson has often pointed out that championships are rarely decided by talent alone. At the highest level, every finalist has talent. The difference is who can still execute when the noise becomes impossible to ignore. Watching Noah through those years, that idea became impossible to dismiss. His rivals prepared for his speed. Few seemed prepared for his belief. Every race became more than a contest of acceleration and top-end mechanics. It became a contest of conviction. Could Noah back up everything he had said? Could he carry the pressure he had invited upon himself? Time after time, he answered in the only way that mattered, not with words, but with performances. And as those victories accumulated, something remarkable began to happen. People slowly stopped talking about Noah Lyles as an entertainer. They started talking about him as a champion, but becoming a champion was never the final goal. Because the greatest athletes don't just win races. They change the way the next generation thinks about winning. And that is where Noah Lyles' story becomes bigger than medals. It becomes the story of a man trying to redefine what a modern sprint champion can be. Coming up, Noah Lyles wasn't just chasing history. He was trying to change the future of sprinting itself. By now, Noah Lyles had achieved what every sprinter dreams of: world titles, Olympic success, global recognition. For many athletes, that would have been the end of the story. Win enough races, collect enough medals, take your place among the greats. But Noah never seemed satisfied with simply being remembered for what happened between the starting gun and the finish line. He wanted something bigger. He wanted people to care about track and field again. For years, sprinting had searched for its next global personality. The sport still had extraordinary athletes. It still had breathtaking performances, but it needed someone willing to connect with a new generation of fans. Noah embraced that responsibility. Some loved his confidence, Some questioned it, but almost everyone had an opinion. And in modern sport, that matters. Great champions don't just dominate competitions, they make people pay attention. Throughout his work as a broadcaster and analyst, Michael Johnson has often argued that elite athletes have the opportunity to elevate their sport not only through performances, but through the way they present themselves to the world. Watching Noah Lyles, many people began to see exactly that. He celebrated victories with emotion. He spoke openly in interviews. He welcomed expectations instead of hiding from them. He understood that fans rarely remember statistics alone. They remember stories. And Noah was creating one every time he stepped onto the track. Yet perhaps his greatest achievement wasn't changing public perception. It was changing the expectations placed on future champions. For years, young sprinters believed they had to fit a certain image: quiet, careful, predictable. Noah challenged that idea. He showed that authenticity could exist alongside discipline. That personality didn't have to come at the expense of professionalism, and that confidence could inspire rather than distract. That doesn't mean everyone agreed with him. Far from it. Criticism never disappeared. Every bold statement invited another wave of skepticism. Every celebration became another debate. But the remarkable thing was this: Noah never changed simply to make people comfortable. He kept racing. He kept winning. And slowly, the conversation shifted. People stopped asking why Noah Lyles acted differently. Instead, they started asking whether a new generation of athletes would follow his example, because influence is measured differently than speed. World records can eventually be broken. Olympic titles can change hands. But changing the culture of a sport, that lasts much longer. And perhaps that is what Michael Johnson and others who have closely followed the evolution of sprinting recognized over time. Noah Lyles wasn't just chasing medals. He was helping redefine what it meant to be the face of modern sprinting. But every era eventually faces one final question. Not whether a champion was great, but whether that greatness changed the sport forever. And that is the question Noah Lyles is still answering today. Coming up in the final chapter, we'll look at the legacy Noah Lyles is building and why his story is far from finished. Every generation leaves behind one athlete who changes the conversation, not because they win the most races, not because they set the most records, but because they forced the sport to rethink what greatness actually looks like. For years, sprinting measured greatness in numbers: Olympic gold medals, world records, fastest times. Those achievements will always matter, but they never tell the entire story. The greatest champions don't just leave statistics behind, they leave ideas. Looking at Noah Lyles today, it's easy to focus on the medals, the world titles, the Olympic triumphs, the unforgettable finishes. Those moments deserve to be remembered. But perhaps they aren't the most important part of his legacy. Throughout his years covering the sport, Michael Johnson has consistently emphasized that championship racing is won as much by mindset as by physical ability. Preparation, composure, the willingness to perform when everything is on the line. Watching Noah's career unfold, many fans began to recognize those same qualities, not because they appeared in one spectacular race, but because they appeared again and again and again. Champions can have great seasons. Legends create lasting influence. Noah Lyles has shown that confidence doesn't have to hide behind silence. That personality doesn't have to come at the expense of discipline. That pressure can be embraced rather than feared. Whether everyone agrees with his style has never really been the point. The point is that he has remained true to it. Every championship, every interview, every expectation, he has carried them all in his own way. And perhaps that is what separates remarkable athletes from unforgettable ones. They don't ask the sport to adapt to them. They challenge the sport to see greatness differently. Maybe that's why Michael Johnson and many others who have spent decades studying elite sprinting have so often highlighted the qualities that can't be measured by a stopwatch. Because speed fades, records fall, new champions always arrive, but the competitors who change how future generations think, those athletes remain part of the sport forever. So perhaps the real question was never whether Noah Lyles would become one of the fastest men in the world. The real question was this: could one athlete redefine what a modern sprint champion looks like? Every race he runs continues to add another chapter to that answer. And maybe that's what people missed in the beginning. Not his speed, not his confidence, but his belief that a champion's job isn't only to cross the finish line first. It's to leave the sport different than they found it. Because in the end, the stopwatch tells us who won. History decides who changed the game. And Noah Lyles' story is still being written.